Both parties are sort of prepping for the fallout from the Supreme Court's decision, which could come down any day now, on the health care law. This, as a new poll shows, 41% of Americans want the entire health care law overturned. 27% say they just want to excise the federal mandate out of the health care law. And only 24% say they want to keep the law just as it is. So about 1 in 4 Americans, as represented by this poll, want to keep it just like it is. So that leaves a lot of room for change, perhaps, in the future. And the Obama administration has said that they'll be ready if the law and the mandate go down, or part of it, or all of it. The Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius says she believes that if that happens, that it would be a catastrophe.
We've had 2 years of incredible changes and improvements to Medicare, stabilizing preventive services. We assumed that would be unraveled because those would no longer be the law. It has some pretty cataclysmic impact along the way.
So Republicans do not agree with that, but they say that they will wait to see what the Supreme Court decides before putting forth their alternative if it gets shot down. Joined now by Brad Blakeman, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush, and Robert Hoops is a former advisor to Joe Biden. He's the president of VOX Global. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to have you here today. I mean, this is going to happen any day. They said in June, and we expect that it'll come sometime over the next 10 days or so. If it gets shot down, Brad, should Republicans be ready with something more specific than just saying, well, we'll figure it out if it happens?
Yes, they must analyze the court's decision, and then they must have a coordinated response between the House, the Senate, and Mitt Romney. He's the presidential nominee who's going to have to carry a lot of this water in the debates with President Obama and with what he offers as an alternative. Republicans, it's not enough to say the law has been struck down. If that happens, they must have an alternative. And contrary, if the law is upheld, they have to double down their efforts to repeal and replace it once they take power in January of 2013.
Yeah. Robert, when you look at those poll numbers, they're pretty dire. Only 1 out of every 4 say that they want to keep the law the way it is. So that leaves a lot of room for improvement, and that may or may not be, it's not actually the business of the Supreme Court. They're just going to rule whether or not they think it's constitutional. But are changes in order either way on the Democratic side, do you think?
I think there's a couple interesting things about that poll. One is I wonder how many college students were in that poll who are going to keep their parents' health care coverage until they're 26, or how many seniors were in that poll that have already seen savings because of the changes in Medicare that the Secretary of Health and Human Services discussed. The other interesting thing in the poll is the gap between the American public generally and the Tea Party. The Tea Party, almost 2 to 1, is more adamant on this position than the American public, which really speaks to the need, if it is overturned part or wholly, then what is the solution? Because we're going to continue to have people going into emergency rooms for primary care that they should be getting from a family doctor. We're going to have people lose coverage because of primary or pre-existing conditions. And we're going to have an increase in cost because people who have insurance are going to be subsidizing those who don't.
As Kathleen Sebelius says, that it would be a horrible situation to land in if indeed it gets overturned. But I think the question politically, when you look at this, Brad, is whether or not, as I said before, the Republicans need to have more of a response, and they have been criticized, and perhaps justifiably so, for not having a sort of clear-cut alternative and perhaps legislation, sort of in the hopper and ready to go, that answers some of the questions that would be changed by that outcome.
Well, we know that this president created a constitutional crisis on health care. There wasn't the kind of crisis on health care as there was on the economy when this president took office, and he's ruled out of ideology instead of reality. Now, having said that, we can't anticipate what the court is going to do. We have to react to what the court does. We have to do it quickly, and we have to make sure, again, it's coordinated between the House, the Senate, and the presidential standard bearer for us, Mitt Romney. And unless we're coordinated with a proper response as to what we will do depending on what the Supreme Court does, then I think that we hand a gift to the president, who is, by the way, if health care is struck down, this president has an awful lot of explaining to do to the American people as to why he concentrates on health care at the expense of the economy.
Go ahead, Robert.
Brad, there's no alternative.
There is no alternative.
Obama that no. You said you're
Fix
waiting
what's
until
broken.
the court decides. What Romney, and this is the Republican conundrum, is at the core of the Romney plan is the core of the Obama plan. That people who can afford insurance should have insurance. So the Republicans have held back on any proposal, any legislation, any hearing, and instead, let's just repeal.
The reason why we held back is because it's in the bailiwick of the Supreme Court. And you guys created the crisis by which the Supreme Court gets this case. There's very little we can do to overturn a mandate when we have a Democratic president and a Senate controlled by Democrats.
I don't accept
what
that
John
premise.
Boehner said, he said what we won't do is pass a 2,700-page bill in the middle of the night that no one has read. What we won't do is tell the American people that they have to pass the bill before we know what's in it.
That's a phony straw man. Look, they run the House of Representatives. They can hold hearings. They can recruit Democrats. They can write the op-eds.
It's
they can take the
senseless
message
to
to
do
the
that
American
work
people.
and waste the
Nobody's
government's time
willing to
when
do
the Supreme
hard
Court
work.
is going to decide this case.
Gotta go,
Nobody's
guys.
willing to. All right, nobody's willing to do the hard work on Capitol Hill and pass tough legislation.
That may be true. That may be the reason that there's like a 15% approval rating for Congress overall.
There you go.
Thanks very much, Rob.